Nature, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Nature is but an image or imitation of wisdom, the last thing of the soul. Nature being a thing which doth only do, but not know. Plotinus. Introduction. Our age is retrospective. It builds the sparklers of the fathers. It writes biographies, histories, and criticism. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face, we through their eyes. Why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should not we have a poetry and philosophy of insight and not of tradition? And a religion by revelation to us, and not the history of theirs? Embosomed for a season in nature, whose floods of life stream around and through us, and invite us by the powers they supply to action proportion to nature. Why should we grope among the dry bones of the past, or put the living generation into a masquerade out of its faded wardrobe? The sun shines today also. There is more war and flags in the fields. There are new lands, new men, new thoughts. Let us demand our own works and laws and worship. Undoubtedly, we have no questions to ask which are unanswerable. We must trust the perfection of the creation so far, as to believe that whatever curiosity the order of things has awakened in our minds, the order of things can satisfy. Every man's condition is the solution in hieroglyphic to those inquiries he would put. He acts it as life, before he apprehends it as truth. In like manner, nature is already, in its forms and tendencies, describing its own design. Let us interrogate the great apparition that shines so peacefully around us. Let us inquire to what end is nature. All science has one aim, namely to find a theory of nature. We have theories of races and of functions, but scarcely yet a remote approximation to an idea of creation. We are now so far from the road to truth that religious teachers dispute and hate each other, and speculative men are esteemed unsound and frivolous. But to a sound judgment, the most abstract truth is the most practical. Whenever a true theory appears, it will be its own evidence. Its test is that it will explain all phenomena. Now many are thought not only unexplained, but unexplicable, as language, sleep, dreams, beasts, sex. Philosophically considered, the universe is composed of nature and soul. Strictly speaking, therefore, all that is separate from us, all which philosophy distinguishes as the not me, that is, both nature and art, all other men and my own body, must be ranked under this name, nature. In enumerating the values of nature and casting up their sum, I shall use the word in both senses, in its common and in its philosophical import. In inquiries so general as our present one, the inaccuracy is not material. No confusion of thought will occur. Nature, in the common sense, refers to essences unchanged by man, space, the air, the river, the leaf. Art is applied to the mixture of his will with the same things, as in a house, a canal, a statue, a picture. But his operations taken together are so insignificant, a little chipping, baking, patching, and washing, that in an impression so grand as that of the world on the human mind, they do not vary the results. Chapter 1. Nature. To go into solitude, A man needs to retire as much from his chamber as from society. I am not solitary whilst I read and write, though nobody is with me. But if a man would be alone, let him look at the stars. The rays that come from those heavenly worlds will separate between him and vulgar things. One might think the atmosphere was made transparent with this design, to give men in the heavenly bodies the perpetual presence of the sublime. Seen in the streets of cities, how great they are! If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore, and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which had been shone? But every night come out these preachers of beauty, and light the universe with their admonishing smile. The stars awaken a certain reverence, because though always present, they are always inaccessible, but all natural objects make a kindred impression. When the mind is open to their influence, nature never wears a mean appearance, neither does the wisest man extort all her secrets, and lose his curiosity by finding out all her perfection. Nature never became a toy to a wise spirit. The flowers, the animals, the mountains reflected all the wisdom of his past hour, as much as they had delighted the simplicity of his childhood. When we speak of nature in this manner, we have a distinct but most poetical sense in the mind. We mean the integrity of impression made by manifold natural objects. It is this which distinguishes the stick of timber of the woodcutter from the tree of the poet. The charming landscape which I saw this morning is indubitably made up of some 20 or 30 farms. Miller owns this field, look that, and many the woodland beyond, but none of them owns the landscape. There is a property in the horizon which no man has but he whose eye can integrate all the parts, that is, the poet. This is the best part of these men's farms, yet to this their land deeds give them no title. To speak truly, few adult persons can see nature. Most persons do not see the sun. At least they have a very superficial seeing. The sun illuminates only the eye of the man, but shines into the eye and the heart of the child. The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are still truly adjusted to each other, who has retained the spirits of infancy even into the era of manhood. His intercourse with heaven and earth becomes part of his daily food. In the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through the man, in spite of real sorrows. Nature says, "He is my creature," and mark all his impertinent griefs, "He shall be glad with me." Not the sun or the summer alone, but every hour and season yields its tribute of delight. For every hour and change corresponds to and authorizes a different state of the mind, from breathless noon to grimmest midnight. Nature is a setting that fits equally well a comic or a morning piece. In good health, the air is a cordial of incredible virtue. Crossing a bare common in snow puddles, a twilight under a clouded sky, without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I fear to think how glad I am. In the woods too, a man casts off his years, as the snake his love, and at what period soever of life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God, a decorum and sanctity reign. A perennial festival is dressed, and the cat sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, leaving me my eyes, which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the breathed air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part of, or practical of God. The name of the nearest friend sounds then foreign and accidental. To be brothers, to be acquaintances, master or servant, is then a trifle and a disturbance. I am the lover of uncontent and immortal beauty. In the wilderness, I find something more dear and cognate than in streets or villages. In the tranquil landscape, and especially in the distant line of the horizon, man beholds somewhat as beautiful as his own nature. The greatest delight which the fields and woods minister is the suggestion of an occult relation between man and the vegetable. I am not alone and unacknowledged. They nod to me, and I to them. The waving of the balls in the storm is new to me and old. It takes me by surprise, and yet is not unknown. Its effect is like that of a higher thought or a better emotion coming over me, when I deemed I was thinking justly or doing right. Yet it is certain that the power to produce this delight does not reside in nature, but in man, or in a harmony of both. It is necessary to use these pleasures with great temperance, for nature is not always tricked in holiday attire, but the same scene which yesterday breathed perfume and glittered as for the frolic of the nymphs, is overspread with melancholy today. Nature always wears the colors of the spirits. To a man laboring under calamity, the heat of his own fire hath sadness in it. Then there is a kind of contempt of the landscape felt by him who has just lost by death or dear friend. The sky is less grand as it shuts down over less worth in the population. Chapter 2. Commodity. Whoever considers the final cause of the world will discern a multitude of uses that enter as parts into that result. They all admit of being thrown into one of the following classes: commodity, beauty, language, and discipline. Under the general name of commodity, I rank all those advantages which our senses owe to nature. This, of course, is a benefit which is temporary and immediate, not ultimate, like its service to the soul. Yet, although low, it is perfect in its kind, and is the only use of nature which all men apprehend. The misery of man appears like childish petulance when we explore the steady and prodigal provision that has been made for his support and delight. On this green ball which floats him through the heavens, what angels invented these splendid ornaments? these rich conveniences, this ocean of air above, this ocean of water beneath, this firmament of earth between, this zodiac of light, this tent of dropping clouds, this stripped coat of climates, this fourfold year, beasts, fire, water, stones, and corn serve him. The field is at once his floor, his workyard, his playground, his garden, and his bed. More servants wait on man than he'll take notice of. Nature, and its ministry to man, is not only the material, but is also the process and the result. All the parts incessantly work into each other's hands for the profits of men. The wind sows the seed, the sun evaporates the seed, the wind blows the vapor to the field, the ice on the other side of the planet condenses rain on this. The rain feeds the plant feeds the animal, and thus the endless circulations of the divine charity nourish men. The useful arts are but reproductions or new combinations by the wits of men, of the same natural benefactors. He no longer waits for farrowing gales, but by means of steam, he realizes the fable of Ulysses' back, and carries the 32 winds in the boiler of his boat. To diminish friction, he paves the road with iron bars, and mounting the coach with a shipload of men, animals, and merchandise behind him, he darts through the country, from town to town, like an eagle or a swallow through the air. By the aggregates of these aids, how is the face of the world changed from the era of Noah to that of Napoleon? The private poor man hath cities, ships, canals, bridges built for him. He goes to the post office, and the human race run on his errands. To the bookshop, and the human race read and write of all that happens for him. To the courthouse, and nations repair his wrongs. He sets his house upon the road, and the human race go forth every morning and shovel out the snow, and cut a path for him. But there is no need of specifying particulars in this class of use. The catalogue is endless, and the examples so obvious, that I shall leave them to the reader's reflection, with the general remark that this mercenary benefit is one which has respect to a farther good. A man is fed, not that he may be fed, but that he may work. Chapter 3. Beauty. A nobler want of man is served by nature, namely the love of beauty. The ancient Greeks called the world beauty. Such is the constitution of all things, or such the plastic power of the human eye, that the primary forms, as the sky, the mountain, the tree, the animal, give us a delight in and for themselves, a pleasure arising from outline, color, motion, and grouping. This seems partly owing to the eye itself. The eye is the best of artists, by the mutual action of its structure and of the laws of light. Perspective is produced, which integrates every mass of objects, of what character soever, into a well-colored and shaded globe, so that where the particular objects are mean and unaffecting, the landscape which they compose is round and symmetrical, And as the eye is the best composer, so light is the first of painters. There is no object so full that intense light will not make beautiful, and the stimulus it affords to the sense, and a sort of infinitude which it hath, like space and time, make all matter gay. Even the corpse hath its own beauty, but beside this general grace diffused over nature, almost all the individual forms are agreeable to the eye, as it's a proof that our endless imitations of some of them, as the acorn, the grape, the pine cone, the wheat ear, the egg, the wings, and forms of most birds, the lion's claw, the serpent, the butterfly, seashells, flames, clouds, buds, leaves, and the forms of many trees as the palm. For better consideration, we may distribute the aspects of beauty in a threefold manner. First, the simple perception of natural forms is a delight. The influence of the forms and actions in nature is so needful to man that in its lowest functions it seems to lie on the confines of commodity and beauty. In the body and mind which have been cramped by nauseous work or company, nature is medicinal and restores their tone. The tradesman, the attorney comes out of the din and craft of the street, and sees the sky and the woods, and is a man again. In their eternal calm, he finds himself. The health of the eye seems to demand a horizon. We are never tired, so long as we can see for enough. But in other hours, nature satisfies the soul purely by its loveliness, and without any mixture of corporeal benefits. I have seen the spectacle of morning from the hilltop over against my house, from daybreak to sunrise, with emotions which an angel might share. The long slender bars of cloud float like fishes in the sea of crimson light from the earth as the shore. I look out into that silent sea. I seem to partake its rapid transformations. The active enchantment reaches my dust, and I dilate and conspire with the morning wind. How does nature defy us with a few and cheap elements? Give me health and a day, and I will make the pomp of emperors ridiculous. The dawn is my Assyria, the sunset and moonrise my Paphos, and unimaginable realms of fairy. Broad noon shall be my England of the senses and the understanding. The night shall be my Germany of mystic philosophy and dreams. Not less excellent, except for our less susceptibility in the afternoon, was the charm, last evening, of a January sunset. The western clouds divided and subdivided themselves into pink flakes, modulated with tints of unspeakable softness, and the air had so much life and sweetness that it was a pain to come within doors. What was it that nature would say? Was there no meaning in the lay repose of the valley behind the mill, in which Homer or Shakespeare could not reform for me in words? The leafless trees become spires of flame in the sunset, with the blue east of their background, and the stars of the dead calyxes of flowers, and every withered stem and stubble ringed with frost contribute something to the mute music. The inhabitants of cities suppose that the country landscape is pleasant only half the year. I please myself with observing the graces of the winter scenery, and believe that we are as much touched by it as by the genial influences of summer. To the attentive eye, each moment of the year has its own beauty, and in the same field, it beholds, every hour, a picture which was never seen before, and which shall never be seen again. The heavens change every moment, and reflect their glory or gloom on the plains beneath. The state of the crop in the surrounding farms alters the expression of the earth from week to week. The succession of native plants in the pastures and roadsides, which make the silent clock by which time tells the summer hours, will make even the divisions of the day sensible to a keen observer. The chirps of birds and insects, like the plants punctual to their time, follow each other, and the year has room for all. By watercourses, the variety is greater. In July, the blue pontederia or pickerel weed blossoms in large beds in the shallow parts of our pleasant river, and swarms with yellow butterflies in continual motion. Art cannot rival this pomp of purple and gold. Indeed, the river is a perpetual gala, and boasts each month a new ornament. But this beauty of nature, which is seen and felt as beauty, is the least part. The shows of day, the dewy morning, the rainbow mountains, orchards, and blossom stars, moonlight, shadows, and still water, and the like, if too eagerly hunted, become shows merely, and mock us with their unreality. Go out of the house to see the moon, and its mere tinsel, it will not please as when its light shines upon your necessary journey. The beauty that shimmers in the yellow afternoons of October, whoever could clutch it, go forth to find it, and it is gone. It is only a mirage as you look from the windows of the diligence. 2. The presence of a higher, namely of the spiritual element, is essential to its perfection. The high and divine beauty which can be loved without effeminacy is that which is found in combination with the human will, and never separates. Beauty is the mark God sets upon virtue. Every natural action is graceful. Every heroic act is also decent, and causes the place and the bystanders to shine. We are taught by good actions that the universe is a property of every individual in it. Every rational creature has all nature for his story and estate. It is his, if he will. He may divest himself of it. He may creep into a corner and abdicate his kingdom, as most men do, but he is entitled to the world by his constitution, in proportion to the energy of his thought and will. He takes up the world into himself, all those things for which men plough, build, or sell, obey virtue, said an ancient historian. The winds and waves, said Gibbon, are always on the side of the ablest navigators. So are the sun and moon and all the stars of heaven. When a noble act is done, perchance in a scene of great natural beauty, when Leonidas and his 3 husband-maters consume one day in dying, and the sun and moon come each and look at them once in the steep defile of Thermopylae, when Arnold Winkelried in the high Alps, under the shadow of the Aventine, gathers in his sight a ship of Austrian spares to break the line for his comrades. Are not these heroes entitled to add the beauty of the scene to the beauty of the dead? When the bark of Columbus nears the shore of America, before it, the beach lined with savages, fleeing out of all their huts of kin, the sea behind, and the purple mountains of the Indian archipelago around. Can we separate the man from the living picture? Does not the New World clothe his form with her palm groves and savannas as feeds drapery? Ever does natural beauty steal in like air, and envelope great actions? When Sir Harry Vane was dragged up the Tower Hill, sitting on a slate to suffer death, as the champion of the English laws, one of the multitude cried out to him, "You never stayed on so glorious a seat, Charles II, to intimidate the citizens of London, caused the patriot Lord Russell to be drawn in an open coach to the principal streets of the city on his way to Scarfield. But, to use the simple narrative of his biographer, the multitude imagined they saw liberty and virtue sitting by his side. In private places, among sordid objects, an act of truth or heroism seems at once to draw to itself the sky as its temple, the sun as its candle. Nature stretched out her arms to embrace man. Only let his tufts be of equal greatness. Willingly does she follow his steps with the rose and the violet, and bend her lines of grandeur and grace to the decoration of her darling child. Only let his thoughts be of equal scope, and the frame will suit the picture. A virtuous man is in unison with her works, and makes the central figure of the invisible sphere. Homer, Pindar, Socrates, Phocion associate themselves fitly in our memory with the whole geography and climates of Greece. The visible heavens and earth sympathize with Jesus. And in common life, whosoever has seen a person of powerful character and happy genius will have remarked how easily he took all things along with him, the persons, the opinions, and the day, and nature became ancillary to a man. Third, there is still another aspect under which the beauty of the world may be viewed, namely, as it becomes an object of the intellect. Beside the relation of things to virtue, they have a relation to thought. The intellect searches out the absolute order of things as they stand in the mind of God, and without the colors of affection, the intellectual and the active powers seem to succeed each other in man, and the exclusive activity of the one generates the exclusive activity. There is something unfriendly in each to the other, but they are like the alternate periods of feeding and working in animals. Each prepares and certainly will be followed by the others. Therefore, this beauty which in relation to actions, as we have seen, comes unsought, and comes because it is unsought, remained for the apprehension and the pursuit of the intellect, and then again, in its turn, of the active power. Nothing divine dies. All good is eternally reproductive. The beauty of nature reforms itself in the mind, and not for barren contemplation, but for new creation. All men are in some degree impressed by the face of the world, some men even to delight. This love of beauty is taste. Others have the same love in such excess that, not content with admiring, they seek to embody it in new forms. The creation of beauty is art. The production of a work of art throws light upon the mystery of humanity. A work of art is an abstract or epitome of the world. It is the result or the expression of nature in miniature. For although the works of nature are innumerable and all different, the result or the expression of them all is similar and single. Nature is a sea of forms radically alike and even unique. A leaf, a sunbeam, a landscape, the ocean, make an analogous impression on the mind. What is common to them all? That perfectness and harmony is beauty. Therefore, the standard of beauty is the entire circuit of natural forms, the totality of nature, which the Italians express by defining beauty il più nell'uno. Nothing is quite beautiful alone, nothing but is beautiful in the whole. A single object is only so far beautiful as it suggests this universal grace. The poet, the painter, the sculptor, the musician, the architect seek each to concentrate this radiance of the world on one point, and each in his several work to satisfy the love of beauty which stimulates him to produce. Thus is art, a nature passed through the alembic of man. Thus in art does nature work through the will of a man filled with the beauty of her first works. The world thus exists to the soul to satisfy the desire of beauty. Extend these elements to the uttermost, and I call it an ultimate end. No reason can be asked or given why the soul seeks beauty. Beauty in its largest and profoundest sense is one expression for the universe. God is the all-fair. Truth and goodness and beauty are but different faces of the same. But beauty in nature is not ultimate. It is the herald of inward and eternal beauty, and is not alone a solid and satisfactory good. It must therefore stand as a part and not as yet the last or highest expression of the final cause of nature. Chapter 4. Language. A third use which nature subserves to a man is that of language. Nature is the vehicle of thought, and in a simple, double, and threefold degree. First, words are signs of natural facts. Second, particular natural facts are symbols of particular spiritual facts. Third, nature is the symbol of spirits. First, words are signs of natural facts. The use of natural history is to give us aid in supernatural history. The use of the outer creation is to give us language for the beings and changes of the inward creation. Every word which is used to express a moral or intellectual fact, if traced to its root, is found to be borrowed from some material appearance. Right originally means straight, wrong means twisted, spirit primarily means wind, transgression, the crossing of a line, supercilious, the raising of the eyebrow. We say the heart to express emotion, the head to denote thought, and thought and emotion are, in their turn, words borrowed from sensible things, and now appropriated to spiritual nature. Most of the process by which this transformation is made is hidden from us in the remote time, when language was framed, but the same tendency may be daily observed in children. Children and savages use only nouns or names of things, which they continually convert into verbs and apply to analogous mental acts. second. But this origin of all words that convey a spiritual import, so conspicuous a fact in the history of language, is our release state to nature. It is not words only that are emblematic, it is things which are emblematic. Every natural fact is the symbol of some spiritual fact. Every appearance in nature corresponds to some state of the mind, and that state of the mind can only be described by presenting that natural appearance as its picture. An enraged man is the lion, a cunning man is the fox, a firm man is the rock, a learned man is the torch. A lamb is innocent, a snake is subtle spite. Flowers express to us the delicate affections. Light and darkness are our familiar expression for knowledge and ignorance, and heat for love. The visible distance behind and before us is respectively our image of memory and hope. Who looks upon a river in a meditative hour, and is not reminded of the flux of all things, threw a stone into the stream, and the circles that propagate themselves are the beauty type of all influence. Man is conscious of a universe so saw within or behind his individual life, wherein, as in a firmament, the natures of justice, truth, love, freedom arise and shine. This universal soul, he recalls reason. It is not mine or thine or his, but we are its. We are its property and men. In the blue sky in which the private earth is buried, the sky with its eternal calm and full of everlasting orbs, is the type of reason, that which, intellectually considered, we call reason. Considered in relation to nature, we call spirit. Spirit is the creator. Spirit hath life in itself, and man in all ages and countries embodies it in his language as the Father. It is easily seen that there is nothing lucky or capricious in these analogies, but that they are constant and pervade nature. These are not the dreams of a few poets here and there, but man is an analogist and studies relations in all objects. He is placed in the center of beings, and the ray of relation passes from every other being to him. And neither can man be understood without these objects, nor these objects without man. All the facts in natural history taken by themselves have no value, but are barren like a single sex. But marry it to human history, and it is full of life. Whole floras, all lineas, and Buffon's volume are but dry catalogues of facts, but the most trivial of these facts, the habit of a plant, the organs, or work, or noise of an insect, applied to the illustration of a fact in intellectual philosophy, or in any way associated to human nature, affect us in the most lively and agreeable manner. The seed of a plant, to what affecting analogies in the nature of man, is that little fruits made use of, in all discourse, up to the voice of Paul, who calls the human corpse a seed. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. The motion of the earth round its axis and round the sun makes the day and the year. These are certain amounts of brute light and heat, But is there no intent of an analogy between man's life and the seasons? And do the seasons gain no grandeur or pathos from that analogy? The instincts of the ant are very unimportant considered as the ant, but the moment a ray of relation is seen to extend from it to man, and the little judge is seen to be a monitor, a little body with a mighty heart, then all its habits, even that said to be recently observed, that it never sleeps, become sublime. Because of this radical correspondence between visible things and human thoughts, savages, who have only what is necessary, converse in figures. As we go back in history, language becomes more picturesque until its infancy, when it is all poetry or all spiritual facts are represented by natural symbols. The same symbols were found to make the original elements of all languages. It has moreover been observed that the idioms of all languages approach each other in passages of the greatest eloquence and power. And as this is the first language, so is it the last. This immediate dependence of language upon nature, this conversation of an outward phenomenon into a type of somewhat in human life, never loses its power to affect us. It is this which gives that piquancy to the conversation of a strong-natured farmer or backwoodsman, which all men relish. Thus is nature an interpreter, by whose means man converses with his fellow men. A man's power to connect his thoughts with its proper symbol, and so utter it depends on the simplicity of his character, that is, upon his love of truth and his desire to communicate it without loss. The corruption of man is followed by the corruption of language, when simplicity of character and the sovereignty of ideas is broken up by the prevalence of secondary desires, the desire of riches, the desire of pleasure, the desire of power, the desire of praise, and duplicity, and falsehood take place of simplicity and truth. The power over nature is then interpreter of the will, is in a degree lost. New imagery ceases to be created, and old words are perverted to stand for things which are not. A paper currency is employed when there is no bullion in the vault. In due time, the fraud is manifest, and words lose all power to stimulate the understanding or the affections. Hundreds of writers may be found in every long civilized nation, who for a short time believe and make others believe that they see and utter truth, who do not of themselves clothe one thought in its natural garment, but who feed unconsciously upon the language created by the primary writers of the country, those, namely, who hold primarily on nature. But wise men pierce this rotten diction and fasten words again to visible things, so that picturesque language is at once a commanding certificate that he who employs it is a man in alliance with truth and God. The moment our discourse rises above the ground line of familiar facts, and is inflamed with passion or exalted by thought, it clothes itself in images. A man converses with passion exalted in earnest, if he watch his intellectual processes, will find that always a material image, more or less luminous, arises in his mind, contemporaneous with every thought, which furnishes the vestments of the thought. Hence, good writing and brilliant discourse are perpetual allegories. This imagery is spontaneous. It is the blending of experience with the present action of the mind. It is proper creation. It is the working of the original cause to the instruments he has already made. These facts may suggest the advantage which the country life possesses for a powerful mind over the artificial and curtailed life of cities. We know more from nature than we can and will communicate. Its light flows into the mind evermore, and we forget its presence. The poet, the orator, buried in the woods, whose scenes have been nourished by their fair and appeasing changes, year after year, without design and without heed, shall not lose their lesson altogether in the roar of cities or the broil of politics. Long hereafter, amidst agitation and terror in national councils, in the hour of revolution, these solemn images shall reappear in their morning luster, as fit symbols and words of the thought which the passing events shall awaken. At the call of a noble sentiment, again the woods wave, the pines murmur, the river rolls and shines, and the cattle low upon the mountains, as he saw and heard them in his infancy. And with these forms, the spells of persuasion, the keys of power, are put into his hands. Third, we are thus assisted by natural objects in the expression of particular meanings. But how great a language to convey such peppercorn informations! Did it need such noble races of creatures, this profusion of forms, this host of orbs in heaven, to furnish man with the dictionary and grammar of his municipal speech? Whilst we use this grand cipher to expedite the affairs of our pots and cattle, we feel that we have not yet put it to its use, neither are able. We are like travelers using the cinders of a volcano to roast their eggs, whilst we see that it always stands ready to clothe what we would say. We cannot avoid the question whether the characters are not significant of themselves. Have mountains and waves and skies no significance but what we consciously give them when we employ them as emblems of our thoughts? The world is emblematic. Parts of speech are metaphors because the whole nature is the metaphor of the human mind. The laws of moral nature answer to those of matter as face to face in a glass. The visible world and the relation of its parts is the dialplate of the invisible. The axioms of physics translate the laws of ethics. Thus, the whole is greater than its parts. Reaction is equal to action. The smallest weight may be made to lift the greatest, the difference of weight being compensated by time, and many the like proportions, which have an ethical as well as physical sense. These propositions have a much more extensive and universal sense when applied to human life than when confined to technical use. In like manner, the memorable words of history and the proverbs of nations consist usually of a natural fact selected as a picture or parable of a moral truth. Thus, a rolling stone gathers no moss, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, a cripple in the right way will beat a racer in the wrong. Make hay whilst the sun shines. Tea is hard to carry a full cup even. Vinegar is the son of wine. The last ounce broke the camel's back. Long-leaved trees make roots first, and the like. In their primary sense, these are trivial facts, but we repeat them for the value of their analogical import. What is true of proverbs is true of all fables, parables, and allegories. This relation between the mind and matter is not fancied by some poet, but stands in the will of God, and so is free to be known by all men. It appears to men, or it does not appear. When in fortunate hours we ponder this miracle, the wise man doubts if at all other times he is not blind and deaf. Can these things be, and overcome us like a summer's cloud, without our special wonder? For the universe becomes transparent, and the light of higher laws than its own shines through it. It is the standing problem which has exercised the wonder and the study of every fine genius since the world began. From the era of the Egyptians and the Brahmins to that of Pythagoras, of Plato, of Bacon, of Leibniz, of Swedenborg, there sits the Sphinx at the roadside, and from age to age, as each prophet comes by, he tries his fortune at reading her riddle. There seems to be a necessity in spirit to manifest itself in material forms, in day and night, river and storm, beast and bird, acid and alkali, persist in necessary ideas in the mind of God, and are what they are by virtue of preceding affections. In the world of spirits, effect is the end or last issue of spirits. The visible creation is the terminus or the circumference of the invisible world. Material objects, say the French philosopher, are necessarily kinds of scoria of the substantial thoughts of the Creator, which must always preserve an exact relation to their first origin. In other words, visible nature must have a spiritual and moral side. This doctrine is abstruse, and though the images of garments, scoria, mirror, may stimulate the fancy, we must summon the aid of subtler and more vital expositors to make it plain. Every scripture is to be interpreted by the same spirit which gave it forth. It's the fundamental law of criticism. A life in harmony with nature, the love of truth and of virtue, will purge the eyes to understand her text. By degrees we may come to know the primitive sense of the permanent objects of nature, so that the world shall be to us an open book, and every form significant of its hidden life and final cause. A new interest surprises us, whilst, under the view now suggested, we contemplate the fearful extent and multitude of objects, since every object rightly seen unlocks the new faculty of the soul, that which was unconscious truth becomes, when interpreted and defined in an object, a part of the domain of knowledge, a new amount to the magazine of power. Chapter 5. Discipline. In view of this significance of nature, we arrive at once at a new fact, that nature is a discipline. This use of the world includes the preceding uses as parts of itself: space, time, society, labor, climate, food, locomotion, the animals, the mechanical forces give us
sincerest lessons, day by day, whose meaning is unlimited. They educate both the understanding and the reason. Every property of matter is a school of the understanding, its solidity or resistance, its inertia, its extension, its figure, its divisibility. The understanding act divides, combines, measures, and finds everlasting nutriment and room for its activity in this worthy scene. Meantime, reason transfers all these lessons into its own world of thought by perceiving the analogy that marries matter and mind. First, nature is a discipline of the understanding in intellectual truths. Our dealing with sensible objects is a constant exercise in the necessary lessons of difference, of likeness, of order, of being and seeming, of progressive arrangement, of ascent from particular to general, of combination to one end of manifold voices, proportioned to the importance of the organ to be formed, is the extreme care with which its tuition is provided, a care pretermitted in no single case. What tedious training, day after day, year after year, never ending, to form the common sense. What continual reproduction of annoyances, inconveniences, dilemmas, what rejoicing over us of little men, what disputing of prices, what reckonings of interest, and all to form the hand of the mind, to instruct us that good thoughts are no better than good dreams, unless they be executed. The same good office is performed by property, and its filial systems of date and credit, date, grinning debt, whose iron face the window, the orphan, the sons of genius fear and hate, date, which consumes so much time, which so cripples and disheartens a great spirit with cares that seem so bare, is a preceptor whose lessons cannot be foregone, and is needed most by those who suffer from it most. Moreover, property, which has been well compared to snow, if it fall level today, it will be blown into drifts tomorrow, is merely the surface action of internal machinery, like the index on the face of a clock, whilst now it is the gymnastics of the understanding. It is hiving in the foresight of the spirit, experience in profounder laws. The whole character and fortune of the individual is affected by the least inequalities in the culture of the understanding. For example, in the perception of differences, therefore is space, and therefore time. That many know that things are not huddled and lumped, but sundered and individual. A bell and a plough have each their use, and neither can do the office of the other. Water is good to drink, coal to burn, wool to wear, but wool cannot be drunk, nor water spun, nor coal eaten. The wise man shows his wisdom in separation, in gradation, and his skill of creators and of merits is as wide as nature. The foolish have no range in their skill, but suppose every man is as ever other men. What is not good they call the worst, and what is not hateful they call the best. In like manner, what good heed nature forms in us, she pardons no mistakes. Her E is E, and her nay, nay. The first steps in agriculture, astronomy, zoology, those first steps reach the farmer, the hunter, and the sailor take, teach that nature's dice are always loaded, that in her leaves and rubbish are concealed sure and useful results. How calmly and genially the mind apprehends one after another the laws of physics, what noble emotions dilate the mortal as he enters into the councils of the creation, and feels by knowledge the privilege to be. His insight refines him. The beauty of nature shines in his own breast. Man is greater that he can see this, and the universe less, because time and space relations vanish as laws are known. Here again we are impressed and even daunted by the immense universe to be explored. What we know is the point to what we do not know. Open any recent journal of science and weigh the problems suggested concerning light, heat, electricity, magnetism, sociology, geology, and judge whether in the interest of natural science is likely to be soon exhausted. Passing by many particulars of the discipline of nature, we must not omit to specify too. The exercise of the will or the lesson of power is taught in every event, from the child's successive possession of his several senses up to the hour when he says, "Thy will be done." He is learning the secret that he can reduce under his will, not only particular events, but great classes, nay, the whole series of events, and so conform all facts to his character. Nature is thoroughly mediate. It is made to serve. It receives the dominion of man as meekly as the ass on which the Saviour rode. It offers all its kingdoms to man as the raw material, which he may mould into what is useful. Man is never weary of working it up. He forges the subtle and delicate air into wise and melodious words, and gives them wing as angels of persuasion and comment. More and more, with every thought, does his kingdom stretch over things until the world becomes, at last, only a realized will, the double of the man. Second, sensible objects conform to the premonitions of reason, and reflect the conscience. All things are moral, and in their boundless changes have an unceasing reference to spiritual nature. Therefore, is nature glorious with form, color, and motion, that every globe in the remotest heaven, every chemical change from the rudest crystal up to the laws of life, every change of vegetation, from the first principle of growth in the eye of a leaf to the tropical forest and antediluvian coal mine, every animal function from the sponge up to Hercules, shall hint or thunder to man the laws of right and wrong, and echo the Ten Commandments. Therefore, is nature always the ally of religion, lends all her pomp and richness to the religious sentiment. Prophets and priests, David, Isaiah, Jesus, have drawn deeply from this source. This ethical character so penetrates the bone and marrow of nature as to seem the end for which it was made. Whatever private purpose is answered by any member or part, this is its public and universal function, and is never omitted. Nothing in nature is exhausted in its first use. When a thing has served an end to the uttermost, it is wholly new for an other service. The God, the very end, is converted into a new means. Thus the use of commodity, regarded by itself, is mean and squalid. but it is to the mind an education in the great doctrine of use, namely, that a thing is good only so far as it serves, that the conspiring of parts and efforts to the production of an end is essential to any being. The first and gross manifestation of his truth is our inevitable and hated training in values and wants, in corn and meat. It has already been illustrated in treating of the significance of material things that every natural process is but a version of a moral sentence. The moral law lies at the center of nature and radiates to the circumference. It is the pith and marrow of every substance, every relation, and every process. All things with which we deal preach to us. What is the form but the mute gospel? The chaff and the wheat, weeds and plants, blight, rain, insects, sun. It is the sacred emblem from the first furrow of spring to the last stack, which the snow of winter overtakes in the fields. But the sailor, the shepherd, the miner, the merchant, in their several resorts, have each an experience precisely parallel and leading to the same conclusions. Because all organizations are radically alike, nor can it be doubted that this normal sentiment, which thus stands the air, and grows in the grain, and impregnates the waters of the world, is caught by man and sinks into his soul. The moral influence of nature upon every individual is that amount of truth which it illustrates to him. Who can estimate this? Who can guess how much firmness the sea-beaten rock has taught the fisherman? How much tranquillity has been reflected to man from the azure sky, over whose unspotted deeps the winds for evermore drive flocks of stormy clouds, and leave no wrinkle or stain. How many industry and providence and affection we have caught from the pantomime of brutes. What a certain preacher of self-command is the varying phenomenon of health. Herein is especially apprehended the unity of nature, the unity in variety, which meets us everywhere. All the endless variety of things make a unique and identical impression. Xenophon still complained in his old age that, look where he would, all things hasten back to unity. He was weary to see the same entity in the tedious variety of forms. The fable of Proteus has a cordial truth. Every particular in nature, a leaf, a drop, a crystal, a moment of time is related to the whole, and partakes of the perfection of the whole. Each particle is the microcosm and faithfully renders the likeness of the world. Not only resemblances exist in things whose analogy is obvious, as when we detect the type of the human hand in the flipper of the fossil sorrows, but also in objects wherein there is great superficial unlikeness. Thus architecture is called frozen music by Disdale and Goethe. A Gothic church, said Coleridge, is a petrified religion. Michelangelo maintained that to an architect, a knowledge of anatomy is essential. In Haydn's oratories, the notes present to the imagination not only motions, as for the snake, the stag, and the elephant, but colors also, as the green grass. The granite is different in its laws only by the more or less of heat from the river that wears it away. The river as it flows resembles the air that flows over it. The air resembles the light, which traverses it with more subtle currents. The light resembles the heat, which rises with it through space. Each creature is only a modification of the other. The likeness in the theme is more than the differences, and the radical law is one and the same. Hence it is that the rule of one art, or law of one organization, holds true throughout nature. So, each creature is only a modification of the others. The likeness in theme is more than the difference, and the radical law is one and the same. Hence, it is that a rule of one art, or a law of one organization, hold true throughout nature. So intimate is this unity that it is easily seen. It lies under the undermost garments of nature, and betrays its source in universal spirits, for it pervades thought also. Every universal truth which we express in words implies or supposes every other truth. Verum vero consonant. It is like a great circle on a sphere, comprising all possible circles, which, however, may be drawn, and comprise it in like manner. Every such truth is the absolute in seen from one side, but it has innumerable sides. The same central unity is still more conspicuous in actions. Words are finite organs of the infinite mind. They cannot cover the dimensions of what is in truth. They break, choke, and impoverish it. An action is the perfection and publication of thought. A right action seems to fill the eye, and to be related to all nature. The wise man, in doing one thing, does all, or in the one thing he does rightly. He sees the likeness of all which is done rightly. Words and actions are not the attributes of mute and brute nature. They introduces us to the singular form which predominates over all other forms. This is the human. All other organizations appear to be degradations of the human form. When this organization appears among so many that surround it, the spirit prefers it to all others. It says, "From such as this have I drawn joy and knowledge, and such as this have I found and beheld myself. I will speak to it. It can speak again. It can yield me thoughts already formed and alive. In fact, the eye, the mind, is always accompanied by these forms, male and female, and these are incomparably the richest informations of the power and order that lie at the heart of things. Unfortunately, every one of them bears the marks as of some injury, is marred and superficially defective, nevertheless far different from the deaf and dumb nature around them. These are as like fountain pipes on the unfathomed sea of thought and virtue, whereto they alone, of all organizations, are the entrance train. But where would it stop? We're associated in adolescence and adult life with some friends who, like skies and waters, are coextensive with our idea, who, answering each to a certain affection of the soul, satisfy and desire on that side, whom we lack power to put at such focal distance from us that we can mend or even analyze them. We cannot trust but love them. When much intercourse with a friend has supplied us with a standard of excellence, and has increased our respect for the resources of God, who thus sends a real person to outgo our ideal, when he has, moreover, become an object of thought, and whistle his character retains all its unconscious effect,
is converted in the mind into solid and sweet wisdom. It is a sign to us that his office is closing, and he is commonly withdrawn from our sight in a short time. Chapter 6: Idealism. Thus is the unspeakable but intelligible and practicable meaning of the world conveyed to man. The immortal popule in every object of sense. To this one end of discipline, all parts of nature conspire. A noble doubt perpetually suggests itself, whether this end be not the final cause of the universe, and whether nature outwardly exists. It is a sufficient account of that appearance we call the world, that God will teach a human mind, and so makes it the receiver of a certain number of congruent sensations, which we all call sun and moon, man and woman, house and trade. In my utter importance to test the authenticity of the report of my senses, to know whether the impressions they make on me correspond with outlying objects, what difference does it make whether Orion is up there in heaven, or some god pens the image in the firmaments of soul? The relations of parts and the end of the whole remaining the same. What is the difference? Whether land and sea interact, and words revolve and intermingle with number or end, deep yawning under deep, and galaxy balancing galaxy, throughout absolute space, or whether without relations of time and space. The same appearances are inscribed in the constant faith of man. Whether nature enjoy a substantial existence without or is the only in the apocalypses of the mind, it is alike useful and alike venerable to me. Be it what it may, it is ideal to me, so long as I cannot try an accuracy of my senses. The frivolous make themselves merry with the ideal theory, as if its consequences were brusky, as if it affected the stability of nature. It surely does not. God never jests with us, and will not compromise the end of nature by permitting any inconsequence in its procession, any distrust of the permanence of laws, or paralyze the faculties of men. Their permanence is scarcely respected, and his faith therein is perfect. The wheels and springs of men are all set to the hypothesis of the permanence of nature. We are not built like a ship to be tossed, but like a house to stand. It is a natural consequence of this structure that so long as the active powers predominate over the reflective, we resist it with indignation and a hint that nature is more short-lived or immutable than spirit. The broker, the wheelwright, the carpenter, the tollman are much displeased at the intimation, but whilst we acquiesce entirely in the permanence of natural laws, the question of the absolute existence of nature still remains open. It is the uniform effect of culture on the human mind, not to shake our faith in the stability of particular phenomena, as of heat, water, azote, but to lead us to regard nature as a phenomenon, not a substance, to attribute necessary existence to spirit, to esteem nature as an accident and an effect. To the senses and the unrenewed understanding belongs a sort of instinctive belief in the absolute existence of nature. In their view, man and nature are indissolubly joined. Things are ultimate, and they never look beyond their sphere. The presence of reason mars this faith. The first effort of thought tends to relax this despotism of the senses, which binds us to nature as if we were a part of it. It shows us nature aloof and, as it were, afloat. Until this higher agency intervened, the animal eye sees with wonderful accuracy sharp outlines and colored surfaces. When the eye of reason opens, to outline and surface are at once added grace and expression. These proceed from imagination and affection, and abate somewhat of the angular distinctness of objects, if the reason be stimulated to more earnest vision. Outlines and surfaces become transparent and are no longer seen. Causes and spirits are seen through them. The best, the happiest moments of life are these delicious awakenings of the higher powers and the reverential withdrawing of nature before its God. Let us proceed to indicate the effects of culture. First, our first institution in the ideal philosophy is a hint from nature herself. Nature is made to conspire with spirit to emancipate us. Certain mechanical changes, a small alteration in our local position, apprises us of a dualism. We are strangely affected by seeing the shore from a moving ship, from a balloon, or through the tints of an unusual sky. The least change in our points of view gives the whole world the pictorial air. A man who seldom rides needs only to get into a coach and traverse his own town, to turn the street into a puppet show. The men, the women, talking, running, bartering, fighting, the earnest mechanic, the learner, the baker, the boys, the dogs, are unrealized at once, or at least wholly detached from all relation to the observer, and seen as apparent, as substantial beings. What new thoughts are suggested by seeing the face of country quite familiar, in the rapid movement of the railroad car, nay, the most wanted objects, make a very slight change in the point of vision, please us most. In a camera obscura, the butcher's cart, and the figure of one of our own family amuses. So a portrait of a well-known face gratifies us. Turn the eyes upside down, by looking at the landscape through your legs, and how agreeable is the picture, though you have seen it any time these 20 years. In these cases, by mechanical means, it suggested the difference between the observer and the spectacle, between man and nature. Hence arises pleasure mixed with awe. I may say, a low degree of the sublime is felt from the fact, probably, that man is hereby apprised that whilst the world is a spectacle, something in himself is stable. Second, in a higher manner, the poet communicates the same pleasure. By a few strokes he delineates as on air the sun, the mountain, the camp, the city, the hero, the madman, not different from what we know them, but only lifted from the ground and floats before the eye. He now fixes the land and the sea, makes them revolve around the axis of his primary thought, and disposes them anew. Possessed himself by a heroic passion, he uses matter as symbols of it. The sensual man conforms thoughts to things, the poet conforms things to his thoughts. The one esteems nature as rooted and fast, the other as fluid and impresses his being thereon. To him, the refractory world is ductile and flexible. He invests dust and stones with humanity and makes them the words of the reason. The imagination may be defined to be the use which the reason makes of the material world. Shakespeare possesses the power of subordinating nature for the purposes of expression beyond all poets. His imperial muse tosses the creation like a bauble from hand to hand to embody any capricious shade of thought that is uppermost in his mind. The remotest spaces of nature are revisited, and the farthest sundered things are brought together by a subtle spiritual connection. We are made aware that magnitude of material things is merely relative, and all objects shrink and expand to serve the passion of the poet. Thus, in his sonnets, the lace of birds, the scents and dyes of flowers, he finds to be the shadow of his beloved, time which keeps her from him, as his chest. The suspicion she has awakened is her ornament. The ornament of beauty is suspect, a crow which flies in heaven's sweetest air. His passion is not the fruit of chance, it swells, as he speaks, to a city or a state. No, it was builded far from accident. It suffers not in smiling pomp, nor falls under the brow of thrilling discontent. It fears no policy, that heretic, that works on leases of short-numbered hours, but all alone stands hugely politic. In the strength of his constancy, the pyramids seem to him reason and chancery, and the freshness of youth and love dazzles him with its resemblance to morning. Take those lips away, which so sweetly were first won, and those eyes, the break of day, lights that do mislead the morn. The wild beauty of this hyperbole, I may say in passing, it would not be easy to match in literature. This transfiguration which all material objects undergo through the passion of the poet, this power which he exerts at any moment to magnify the small, to magnify the great, might be illustrated by 1,000 examples from his plays. I have before me the Tempest, and will cite only these few lines. Prospero, the strong-based promontory, have I made shake, and by the spirits plucked up, the pine and cedar. Prospero calls for music to soothe the frantic Alonso and his companions, a solemn air, and the best comforter to an unsettled fancy, cure the brains, now useless, broiled within this guile. Again, the charm dissolves space, and as the morning steals upon the night, melting the darkness, so their rising senses begin to chase the ignorant fumes that mantle their clearer reason. Their understanding begins to swell, and the approaching tide will shortly fill the reasonable shores that now lie foul and muddy. The perception of real affinities between events, that is to say, of ideal affinities, for those only are real, enables the poet thus to make free with the most imposing forms the phenomena of the world, and to assert the predominance of the soul. Third, whilst thus the poet delights us by animating nature like a creator with his own thoughts, he differs from the philosopher only hearing that the one proposes beauty as his main end, the other truth, but the philosopher, not less than the poet, postpones the apparent order and relations of things to the empire of thought. The problem of philosophy, according to Plato, is for all that exists conditionally to find a ground unconditioned and absolute. It proceeds on the faith that the law determines all phenomena, which being known, the phenomena can be predicted. The law, when in the mind, is an idea, Its beauty is infinite. The true philosopher and the true poet are one, and the beauty, which is truth, and the truth, which is beauty, is the aim of health. It's not the charm of one of Plato's or Aristotle's definitions, strictly like that of the Antigone of Sophocles. It is, in both cases, that a spiritual life has been imparted to nature, that the solid seeming block of matter has been pervaded and dissolved by a thought, that this feeble human being has penetrated the vast masses of nature with an informing soul, and recognized itself in their harmony, that is, sees their law. In physics, when this is particulars and carries centuries of observation in a single formula. Thus, even in physics, the material is ever degraded before the spiritual. The astronomer, the geometer rely on their irrefragable analysis, and distant this will be found contrary to all experience, yet it is true, had already transferred nature into the mind and left matter like an outcast corpse. Fourth, intellectual science has been observed to beget invariably a doubt of the existence of matter. Turgot said, "He that has never doubted the existence of matter may be assured he has no aptitude for metaphysical inquiries. It fastens the attention upon immortal necessary and created natures, that is, upon ideas, and in their beautiful and majestic presence, we feel that our outward being is a dream and a shade. Whilst we wait in this Olympus of God, we think of nature as an appendix to the soul. We ascend into their region and know that these are the thoughts of the Supreme Being. These are they who were set up for everlasting, from the beginning wherever the earth was. When he prepared the heavens, they were there. When he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, then they were by him as one brought up with him. Of them his counsel. Their influence is proportionate as objects of science. They are accessible to few men, and all men are capable of being raised by piety or by passion into their region, and no man touches these divine natures without becoming in some degree himself divine, like a new soul. They renew the body, we become physically nimble and lightsome. We tread on air, life is no longer irksome, and we think it will never be so. No man fears age or misfortune change. Whilst we behold and reveal the nature of justice and truth, we learn the difference between the absolute and the conditional or relative. We apprehend the absolute. As it were, for the first time we exist. We become immortal, for we learn that time and space are relations of matter, that with the perception of truth were a virtue as well. They have no affinity. Fifth, finally, religion and ethics, which may be fitly called the practice of ideas, or the introduction of ideas into life, have an analogous effect with all lower culture, integrating nature and suggesting its dependence on spirits. Ethics and religion differ herein, that the one is the system of human duties commencing from man, the other from God. Religion includes the personality of God, ethics does not. They are one to our present design. They both put nature underfoot. The first and last lesson of religion is, the things that are seen are temporal, the things that are unseen are eternal. It puts an affront upon nature. It does that for the unschooled, which philosophy does for Berkeley and Viasa. The uniform language that may be heard in the churches of the most ignorant sects contemn the unsubstantial shows of the world. There are vanities, dreams, Shadows and realities seek the realities of region. The devotee flaws nature. Some theosophists have arrived at a certain hostility and indignation towards matter, as the mentioned in Plotinus. They distrusted in themselves, and in looking back to these flesh pots of Egypt, Plotinus was ashamed of his body. In short, they might all better say of matter what Michelangelo said of external beauty. It is the frail and weary weed in which God dresses the soul which he has called into time. It appears that motion, poetry, physical and intellectual science, and religion all tend to affect our convictions of the reality of external world, but that only there is something ungrateful in expanding too curiously with idealism. I have no hostility to nature, but a child's love to it. I expand and live in the warm day like corn and melons. Let us speak her fair. I do not wish to fling stones at my beautiful mother, nor soil my gentle nest. I only wish to indicate the true position of nature in regard to men, wherein to establish man all right education tends, as the ground which to attain is the object of human life, that is, of humans' connection with nature. Culture invokes the vulgar views of nature, and brings the mind to call that appearance which it uses to call real, and that real which it uses to call visionary. Children, it is true, believe in the external world. The belief that it appears only is an afterthought, but with culture, this faith will as surely arise in the mind as did the first. The advantage of the ideal theory over the popular faith is this, that it presents the world in precisely that view which is almost desirable to the mind. It is, in fact, the view which reason, both speculative and practical, that is, philosophy and virtue, take for seen in the light of thought. The world always is phenomenal, and virtue subordinated to the mind. Idealism sees the world in God. It beholds a whole circle of persons and things, of actions and events, of country and religion, and has plentifully accumulated atom after atom, act after act, and an age creeping past, but as one vast picture which God paints on the instant eternity for the contemplation of the soul. Therefore the soul holds itself off from a too trivial and microscopic study of the universal tablet, and respect the end too much to immerse itself in the means. It sees something more important in Christianity than the scandals of ecclesiastical history or the niceties of criticism, and very incurious concerning persons or miracles, and not all disturbed by scams of historical evidence. It accepts from God the phenomenon as it finds it, as a pure appearance of what it calls its own good or bad fortune, as the union or opposition of other persons. No man is its enemy. It accepts whatever befalls as part of its lesson. It is a watcher more than the doer, and it is the doer, only that it may the better watch.